Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our fifth webinar in our series on how to bulletproof your business. So we covered cybersecurity on Monday. Today, we're tackling an interesting topic, and we had to get the kind of best panelists to help us through this. So hosting the webinar from Cape Town is Mr. David Lees, Joint CEO. Then we also have esteemed panelist, Business Development and Strategy Director, Stephen Cohen. And then we also have our senior technician joining us, Keith Huskisson, who's going to take us through the Active Directory in the cloud topic. Thank you, guys. Hope you enjoy it. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Jaco. So as I usually do when I introduce these webinars, this is now, I think, the fifth in our series. This series of webinars is really about all the elements that you see in the cloud. And this is really a depiction of how IronTree operates. And this is something we set up before the COVID-19 pandemic and before there was any talk of a lockdown. Over the years, we've been moving all of our technology into the cloud. So we obviously started as a company doing backup in the cloud. So the backup and then disaster recovery as a service. We changed our telephony to VoIP about 7 years ago. We host a lot of our database servers. So all of the stuff in the cloud you see there is stuff that we actually use ourselves, and in fact stuff that we promote and sell and support as well. One of the last components that we implemented was Active Directory in the cloud, and Stephen and I were talking yesterday. I mean, Active Directory is a term that Microsoft established, I don't know, probably 15 or 20 years ago when they actually sort of released the first version of Windows Server. And it's really not a descriptive term, and we're going to go into more detail of what it means. But really what it did for us is we had an old server in our office that was used to control our email and our internet connectivity and the domain controller. I know that's a technical term, but it's sort of a management console that allows you to set policies of what happens on your company network, who can do what, who can access what, and a whole lot of other stuff. And our server was really dying about a year ago. And we didn't really want to buy a new server, which, as you guys may or may not know, could cost you 50 to 100,000 Rand. And when Keith joined us, who I'm going to introduce Keith in a second, he just told us, listen, you can put this whole thing into the cloud and it'll cost you nothing. So I'm going to hand over to Keith at this point to talk more about what is Active Directory and what is Active Directory in the cloud. Just an introduction. Keith is one of our senior technicians. Keith is one of those kind of guys that I'm sure all of you know a guy like Keith. It's either your service provider or your IT manager or your receptionist's son who's studying at the tech, one of these guys who is steeped in technology, who whatever you ask him, he'll fix it, whether it's on your phone, on your laptop, anything goes wrong, he will fix it, he will make it work. But if you ask him how he did it and what went wrong, you actually won't understand a word that he's telling you. So Keith's first language is actually geek speak. He also speaks English, and which he's going to speak today. And if he says anything that is too geek speaky, don't worry, Jaco and Stephen and I will translate. So Keith, over to you.
Hi, David. Okay, so first of all, let's start off with what is Active Directory. Active Directory is a service used to manage and monitor your user access across the network and your devices. So it's a central management point. Most people have on-premises Active Directory, but we also have Azure Active Directory. Azure Active Directory is a Microsoft's version of a central management portal for this. There's various products associated with it, but today we're just going to tackle Azure Active Directory. Azure Active Directory is used to manage all your user account permissions as well as monitor your users so you can track their activity. The cool thing about Azure AD is that it actually goes across your entire Office suite, so not just your AD, but your Teams, your Sharepoint, everything. It's a central monitoring platform. So it also adds a layer of security to your system. Let's see, next slide.
So just to interject there, I mean, Stephen and I were having a discussion with Keith last week, and really, I mean, neither of us, we'd both heard of Active Directory for a long time, but neither of us really understood properly what it was. And as I say, it's quite an odd term that they used. It's really a management platform that allows you to manage traffic across your network. But what's great about Azure AD or AD in the cloud, as Keith explained to us, if you have Active Directory in your office on a server, it's like you've got a traffic cop in your office who's directing what actually happens in your office network. But as things move to the cloud, as they have been doing over the last few years, that traffic cop is not seeing what's going on outside of your office. He has no visibility to what's happening in your Office 365 email boxes or some database server that you've got located in a data center. And what the Active Directory in the cloud does, that traffic cop is able to have a view of everything that's happening on your company's domain and can control everything in that domain. Is that correct, Keith?
That is correct. So then we tackle on to the next one. Why do you need Azure AD? So you've already covered some of that, mainly the costs involved. So if you have an Azure AD, you don't need to invest in hardware on sites, which can be costly, especially maintaining hardware. A great thing is that you don't need to worry about backups or anything like that. You don't have to worry about outages. It's in the cloud, so everyone can access it immediately from anywhere in the world.
And I think it became really important in this period because a lot of people are working from home, Keith, that's right. So, I mean, if you're in our case at Irontree, you're the guy that manages our Active Directory in the cloud. So it doesn't really matter that everyone's working at home. You just configured it that you can assist or support or manage or give Stephen and Ty and I any stats that we need to know about what's happening with our workforce working remotely. Is that correct?
That's correct. And you do it all without any third-party technology. You don't need VPNs or firewalls or anything like that. Anyone can just sit down and work, be it from home or internet cafe or in the office. They can access their network wherever they are.
Which is a great thing for us to be able to control that.
So now, a cool thing with Azure AD is it actually the vanilla product comes out free with Office 365 Premium and Essentials. So you don't have to pay for licensing. A lot of the setup costs that come are from Microsoft Server, the user accounts, and the actual software that you put on there. You're each paying for licensing. But with the premium version of Office Suite, you get unlimited accounts with Azure AD. So
Okay,
you save on a lot of money there.
So that's great for guys who are already using Office 365, or as it's about to become called Microsoft 365. All you need to do is ensure that you have the right package and this functionality is included, and you just have to configure it, whether you can do that yourselves or you can ask us to do that, or you have a reseller. Some of you guys watching might be Irontree resellers. Maybe you've got the competency to be able to do this. If you're watching and you don't have Office 365, hopefully you watched our webinar on Office 365 and Teams. And if you don't have Office 365, I think, seriously consider it, because it also gives you this extra management and security layer. Should I move to the next slide, Keith?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on there that advanced features only come with the enterprise edition of Azure AD. So you don't get group policy with the initial one, but you do get multi-factor authentication, which is a great addition to your security.
Okay, so that's a bit of kind of techno speak, which we'll come back to later. But nevertheless, I think to leave it at this point, that it does all the stuff that you're about to show. Well, I mean, you're going to do a live demo now, so you just highlight the stuff that's only available on the premium package. Okay.
Yeah, Dave,
Okay.
I wanted to say, I do think that there are people out there who wouldn't even understand what group policy means. So you'll come back to that, Keith.
Yeah.
Okay, do you want to take over control? I'm going to stop sharing now and you can share your screen, Keith.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is your basic panel for Azure AD. It's a central management portal, so you can access all your features from one location. Some of the features that I really like about Azure AD is its tracking and reporting. At any point, you can go and track your users, especially now that everyone's working from home. You can see if they are actually signed in and working. I'll give an example of that. So if I had to go to our users, I can go into, let's just let's take grants. And you can see what they're up to. Pretty much very simple interface, click sign-ins, and you can see what they're doing. Now, this doesn't just track their Windows sign-ins, which as you can see when they actually logged into their computer. It tracks all their Office products. So you can see what documents they access in SharePoint, the messages that they're sending in Teams. It's a great auditing tool for your management teams. Let's just see here. So it does provide a basic inventory as well. So you can see what devices you have on your network. Without the Group Policy Advanced Edition, you just get a basic overview, but you can see which devices belong to which users, and you get a head count for that. So that does help with inventory.
So let me just interrupt there. I think for me that's a great thing because I think most companies really kind of lose track of what assets they've got in the asset inventory. Who's got what laptop? Where is it? Who's using it? I mean, you get a new employee and you got like Dean's laptop, which is now being used by Greg, and you know, this is a nice, clear way to actually see which assets are being used in your company.
That's correct. Okay, so if we've touched on security, now we can actually look at their security features. You do get basic security with Azure AD. It allows you to do a variety of things, which we'll touch on just now in the sheets. You get Azure AD conditional access, you get identity protection, security center, you get a security score, named locations, authentication methods, and multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication is the basic one that everyone uses. It's another method of keeping your security. So instead of just having a password for your device, you can add an OTP, an email, a phone application. There's multiple ways to do that. So if there's any theft or anything like that, it's quite a good way to protect your system.
So Keith, let me interrupt for a second once again. I think a lot of people have heard of multi-factor authentication. It's becoming quite a buzzword in the sort of cybersecurity space and banking and stuff. You're all using multi-factor authentication with banking. That's the functionality that when you log onto a site, it actually sends a one-time password to your cell phone, or as Keith said, it could be your email. That's an extra layer of verification. So if someone's sort of gets their hands on your device and just, you know, you've got your password stored in your browser and they just log on to your bank, they're not going to be able to log on unless they've also got the device that you use to get that second layer of security, that one-time password. So it's quite an important thing to start thinking about.
Now that ties into Azure AD's security suite because it does actually notify you of bad password entries. So if your IT team gets flagged with alerts of a laptop, you have the ability to actually sign them out of all your Office 365 suite products. You can sign that workstation off the domain, you can take it off SharePoint, take it off Teams, and it's no longer a threat to your environment. Okay, we can go back to the slide, unless you want to touch on the branding.
To the slide, Keith, just talk to us a bit more about the functionality. I think it's conditional access where you can, you know, you can deny people the ability to log in from internet cafes and stuff. Can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, so there are various methods for security. One of them is location. You can actually set specific regions. So what you would call an internet protocol address, an IP address. You can lock down access to certain locations. So when they're at the office, they get full access. When they're roaming around, you can actually change the policies so that they have less access to certain things. So if they're working at an internet cafe and you don't want people watching what they're doing or using Wireshark or any of those other hacking tools, you can limit what they can do. and that's a very good feature, especially with geolocation. Yeah, that's about it. We can go back to the slideshow.
Yeah, okay. Are you just going to, right.
Yeah.
The my screen again. Is everyone seeing, are you seeing my screen, Keith?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so we've done the live demo. So just to go through some of these views again. So as we were saying earlier, this is really kind of a management console that allows you to manage everything that's going on your network. And those of you who watched our cybersecurity webinar would have seen the Panda cybersecurity management console. So this is a kind of a similar thing. When you're working in the cloud, you've got this great ability to log onto a portal or a console that allows you to get vision across your corporate network or environment and manage it wherever you have to, from wherever you are.
That ties in with what we're going to tackle for identity scoring. So Azure AD has multiple ways of security. One of them is identity scoring. It alerts you to devices that have issues. So if ransomware does hit your environment, you'll start getting alerts across your entire dashboard, and then you know to go to your antivirus solution to start cleanup and fixing. So those are some of the topics that we've chosen now. Azure AD conditional access, where you can choose what requirements are needed to be able to use your product. So you can set a limit on location. You can set a limit on the way that you sign in with an OTP. You can use a phone app, or you can use emails. This is just
I love the example that you had in that slide, Keith, about the payroll manager.
Yeah, so say a payroll manager wants to access their payroll system and you have your applications integrated with Azure. You can actually require them to do a multi-factor authentication process to access the system. So you could, like, I know a lot of banks use those tokens where you have to enter a little USB device, and in order to sign into your actual banking, it gives you a little code, and you have to enter that before you can log in. So it's the same thing with Azure, where it adds another level of security. So if someone steals the laptop, they don't have access to your entire inventory.
So the third bullet point there is what you talk about, conditional access. So what you're saying is that for the normal run-of-the-mill day-to-day operations, everyone has got access to everything they need to do, their shared documents, their emails, their calendars and stuff. But for certain applications on your environment, you set this conditional access that only people who need to can access it, and that's done via multi-factor authentication. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. Cool. Let's move on.
Okay, so Active Directory identity protection. This, to sum it up, is basically a scoring system that they use to show you issues. So it's a central management portal where it shows you your risk factor on your devices. They give it a scoring of 1 to 200, I believe. And obviously, the higher the score, the more risk your application is. That's more of an overview for your IT team. So it'll show you if they don't have multi-factor authentication enabled. It'll show you if they don't have geolocation tracking and all the other security features so that nothing slips through the cracks.
So just tell us a bit more. How does it assign that score? So does it look at where you're missing layers of security or policies, or what else does it take into account to assess? Because correct me if I'm wrong, this is like an automated thing that's happening in the background, that the system is actually generating a score based on stuff that it's seeing happening. It's not something
Correct.
that the user enters.
It's basically like a robot that will go in the background and flag it in the alerts and show it to your IT team. Look, there's an issue. This is the most prominent issue.
So at the bottom,
Start
you've got a
investigating
thing
it.
called risky users. How does it know that someone's a risky user?
So for risky users, it'll actually attach a score for how many times they enter a password incorrectly, how many times they fail to sign in, if they have zero security on the device, so no multi-factor authentication, no PIN, and it also shows you passwords that don't meet your requirements. So that's a big issue. A lot of people use dictionary attacks. It's a fancy way of saying that they just try so many passwords until they get in.
Okay.
And those are the type of things that it attacks.
Right.
So your identity score, as I said before, that's just the robot showing you how many devices are actually a threat to your environment, and it automatically generates that number for you across the board. Now that's used to flag scenarios like ransomware. So say you walk in the morning and you see one PC with an alert, then two, then three, then four, you can immediately go to your IT team and go, hey guys, what's going on? Let's get our security suite, like such as Panda. You launch a scan throughout the entire environment and you can actually circumvent it before it gets worse. So a lot of people, like with ransomware, they don't know that their network's being attacked. That's a great way of seeing it.
Well, so it's kind of working by exception, where it's looking at certain policies that you should have in place that you don't. Then it's looking at behavior, who's got a weak password and stuff like that. And then from what you're saying, it's also looking at where something happens which is not a normal kind of behavior on that network.
Correct.
Okay, cool. I get it. Have we covered this slide?
Yes, we have.
Cool.
So the security center is just a management platform. We have tackled this one. This is the location. So you can actually set locations via IP address, as you can see there at the bottom right. You can have different branches with different restrictions. So you can have your head office, you can have a side branch, you can have an internet cafe, that type of stuff, and you can change your policies according to where they are.
Okay, so this is what we're talking about in your demo, where we said you could sort of stop people logging in from a mug and beam, for example.
Correct. You can actually limit access.
Okay, cool. And yeah, all right, cool.
So what is multi-factor authentication? This is when a user requires 2 or more processes to log into their device or system. So you can see here, they can use an email, they can use a phone app, they can use a token, or they can use third-party tools. Microsoft does integrate with them, such as the banking dongles. Just takes a little bit of setup.
So these kind of, this facility, I mean, we've had multi-factor authentication, Keith, for quite a long time, as you say, with banking dongles and one-time pins, even if you're trying to buy electricity on EasyPay.
Correct.
This is bringing it down to a level within your own environment that you can control any part of your IT infrastructure that you want to make more secure.
That's correct.
So this technology really was, up till now, really only, you could get it done in your company, but this has really made it, it's just a switch that you switch on, correct?
Correct. It's literally just a click of a button and you have it. And you get that with the premium product of Office 365.
Yeah.
So as you can see, we've listed all the methods already, but on the right-hand side, there's an example. So when you sign in, it will prompt you and you can choose your method. It even does biometrics, I believe, but that's not something you really want to get into, because if your staff member leaves, then you're stuck. You can't access the device.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Keith. That was very good and very understandable, I think. Steve, do you want to say anything at this point?
Yeah, I've written a few questions here. So, Dave, you touched on it that, previously I would have thought only massive IT departments could invoke two-factor authentication like banks. But now this is like kind of being put into the hands of small business, which I think is amazing. So, like typically, Keith, in a small business, is this easy enough for like the owner manager to set up, or do you have to have a very technical person getting involved in this?
Very simple. You tick a button to turn it on and you choose which methods you want to use.
Okay, my next point is you said that you get it with Office 365 Premium, or as David said, Microsoft 365 Premium. I'm interested that if pretend I'm using Pastel or QuickBooks, and it's not from Microsoft, that product, can you invoke control over those like non-Microsoft applications?
You could, depending on where the service is sitting. So if you had to have it on a specific device, you could limit access to that device. So for example, a VPS or a
You see,
server.
I'll tell you what I'm getting to here is that, David gave a great analogy the other day of, in the days where Active Directory was sitting within your business boundary, you could control what's happening there. The moment they get out, to have it on a hosted server, i.e. in this instance, Azure, allows you to control all devices outside of the office and inside the office, which obviously today has become very relevant in terms of people taking their laptops home, but also people using mobile devices, which they do often. But if I'm now using an external app like Pastel, is this coming from a Windows, because that's my operating system where I can control stuff? So it's almost like two levels. You've got Windows, which we know is a Microsoft product. So I assume Active Directory integrates nicely to the operating system, which is Windows. But what about the non-Microsoft applications within that Windows operating system, like Pastel in this regard?
So as long as the device is joined to the domain, you can manage access to it. So all you'd have to do is put the device that has that on the domain.
So
and then you'd be able to control the security access to it.
Okay, so for me, this is a whole lecture on its own now. What does a domain mean? How hard is it for a small business to actually get devices on a domain? Because, Keith, we never finished that exercise that we wanted to do about, what is a typical small business? And I'm saying a typical small business, if I'm starting a business, let's say 4 employees, I'm going to go to Incredible Connection, buy a laptop, say, dude, you all got an internet connection, load Microsoft 365. I'm not even thinking of Active Directory. I load Pastel on the machines and I'm going. Now Keith walks in and says, hold it, dudes, I can make this a lot better, more efficient, more control. And I almost want to go through the steps. Would your first thing be saying, we should all be on a domain? Because remember, I've got 5 laptops. We all just connected to the internet. Like, I need to get an understanding of how that works.
So with a domain, it is quite a procedure to set up on site with hardware and all that stuff. But with Azure Active Directory, it's as simple as buying a domain, so for your mail, and starting to set up your mailboxes. The moment you put your mailboxes in Office 365, it creates each user for your domain. It's an automated process. So it's very simple to go from a non-domain setup to a domain setup with Office 365.
So Keith, let me interrupt there. So I understand exactly what you're saying, but just for the rest of the guys who may or may not understand, when you say domain, and if you say, well, you just needed to buy a domain, that means, and most companies have got it. I mean, it's irontree.co or it's, it's smallbusiness.com or whatever. That's your domain, right?
That's correct. So your website and your emails, that is essentially your domain.
Because David, I mean, Jaco, I know you've got a limited amount of sessions here, but I would love, Keith, I mean, like, how long would it take for you to do a demo for us about, what does a person do to actually get it running in the way that you're saying? Because to me, it sounds like with this whole new AD 360 and Microsoft's new approach, and the fact that 95% of us are all using Windows, for you to actually show us how to do this, is it a doable thing in a session or not?
I'm gonna say yes and no, because it's dependent on the client's infrastructure. It is never the same thing twice. Just as VPSs are, it's a unique setup every time. If it's a blank setup, we can do that. So say they have no domain, then we could do that.
So once again, I'm interrupting, and sorry for that. But Steve, what at Irontree, what we offer is Keith and our other call center guys' expertise. So anyone who's watching, or any of our clients who are interested in this, who will have the correct version of Office 365 or have it already, we are available to help them configure or do the configuration or set up the domain. Because the beauty of it is it's all cloud-based, we can do that from wherever we are. We don't need to go to people's office. So we do offer that as a service.
Okay, that's great. All right, Dave, then my last question here is, if I'm I am a kind of lay person when it comes to this. Like, I'm looking at, I've got let's call it anti-malware, antivirus stuff, giving me warnings. Now I've got this application giving me warnings. I mean, where does this thing stop and antivirus take over? It's like there's so many dashboards to look at for alerts. Do you get what I'm saying, Keith?
I do. That's why the central management portal comes in handy, because you can see on the risk scores which are actual issues and which are just false positives. And that ties in with your other products. So your AVAS, so that would be, for example, your antivirus system.
So then can I say that this would alert you as to where the risks are and what the problems are, and then you would go into your antivirus software, if I can still use that old term, and go and do your configurations there?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Steve. I think that was good input. So I just want to end off by just going through this final slide again. And as I always say, all of these elements are elements that that we use at Irontree, but I understand that not every business needs all of these elements. So you might already have some, hopefully you all are backing up off-site. Some of you might have VoIP telephony or any one or multiples of these elements. And we understand that not everyone needs every element. So, you know, if you're not sure, talk to us and we will tell you which ones we think will be applicable to your environment. I just want to mention as well that the next webinar, which is tomorrow because Friday's a holiday, is backup and DROS. DROS is disaster recovery as a service. And Stephen and Byron in our Joburg office are going to be hosting that, or the panelists on that webinar. And just to mention, if you're thinking, oh, well, I don't need to watch this because it's just about data backup. Actually, the main topic of that seminar is disaster recovery as a service. And just briefly, that's a facility that if something happens in your office, some kind of disruptive event that means you can't carry on working in your local environment, we will fail you over to a cloud-based hosted environment and you just carry on like nothing else has happened. So I think that's quite an interesting one to watch. And then next week, the VoIP telephony and plan for continuity. I think the voice over IP telephony will be a really nice one to watch, and I encourage you all to join that one. So thanks for watching, and please fill in the poll, which Jaco, by the way, I do see on my screen. Yeah, thanks. That's all from my side. Over to you, Jaco.
All right, cool. Thanks, David. Thanks, Keith, Stephen. Good, insightful questions as always. All right, guys, I see the poll is being completed as I speak. Appreciate that. We also had a couple of chats happening whilst the webinar was going on. I encourage you to reach out directly to Keith. His email address is keith@irontree.co.za. If you have any questions relating to the elements that he spoke about. I see there was a good hosting question. So yeah, please reach out to him directly. And then, yeah, guys, stay safe. And then we'll chat tomorrow in our next session. Cheers, guys. Have a good one.
Ciao.
Cheers.